Hi, Chris, and
Hi,
welcome.
Fabian. How are you doing?
Fine, and you?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Let's introduce yourself in some words.
Okay.
So,
Personally, I am a practitioner of Shiatsu for about 35 years, and I live in Sweden. That's where I work. But nowadays, I teach not only in Sweden, but also internationally. And I'm the author of two books about Shiatsu and Oriental medicine.
yes, two books for the moment in English and maybe soon in French.
Maybe one of them will be in French soon. We're working on that project between you and me, Fabian. Yes, so that would be wonderful if that could happen.
It could be wonderful for all the French people. Yes. So the first question, what are the four C's?
Oh, okay. The four C's is a concept within Oriental medicine. It is mentioned in the Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's classic of internal medicine. And it's mentioned in one chapter. The chapter is 2 pages, and it's a very, very brief
Mhm.
skeletal description of the four C's. So you don't get much information from the Neijing. All you get is little clues. So for the last 13 years, I've been following those clues and building up a body of theory and practice. And that's been done during my practice with my clients, but also as I teach it, each group of students contributes something to our understanding of it. So it's a continually evolving body of knowledge.
Wow, interesting. Chinese and Japanese let some clues in some writing, but never so clear. You have to find yourself.
Exactly. So the four C's are named as the sea of marrow, which is the deepest sea, the sea of blood, which is also quite deep, but a little bit more shallow, the sea of nutrition, which is the a little bit more superficial, and the sea of chi, which is the very superficial sea of ideas and light and movement. So this is the sea which we operate in on a daily basis. When we rest, we move down immediately into the sea of nutrition. Deeper rest takes us into the sea of blood, and the deepest kind of rest takes us into the sea of marrow. So we understand from this system that we very much need to rest deeply. And we understand from this that if we don't rest deeply, we begin to deplete and empty these seas, and that results in something that we nowadays recognize as burnout. It's also a very interesting way of discovering how the lower parts of the system, the deeper parts of the system, are gradually nourished by the upper parts of the system, so that nourishment and energy gradually filters down into the deeper levels. And therefore, we understand how the postnatal Jing nourishes the prenatal Jing and how we can work to bring chronic illness into vibrant health, and extreme fatigue can become vibrancy again. Through this model, it's very easy to explain, very easy to apply.
So you say you act, you do something on the jing, but how can you use the chain, or you there is an action of the chain of the receiver when you use the four C's?
The action of the receiver is the same as every shiatsu form. It's usually the receiver is mostly passive and
Mhm.
the giver is mainly active. So that doesn't change. That's regular shiatsu.
Mhm.
It's just the idea of directing the treatment in a slightly different way. And
Mhm.
also, it gives the practitioner security to know that you can work with chronic disease,
Mhm.
deep-seated illness, and fatigue on a long-term basis. But you understand that the deeper the pathology, the longer it takes to heal.
The question, what is the connection between the sea of blood and all the various aspects of physiology and fertility?
Mm. When we look at the sea of blood, we understand that the blood is the essential matrix for fertility, for life to begin. Within the blood is the entire process of gestation, fertilization, and also sexual essence, even though the deepest part of sexual essence, of course, resides in the sea of marrow, the deepest level. But these two seas are interlinked with each other, so one leads into the other. When we, for just a typical example, if the sea of blood is not functioning very well, then, for example, a woman will have difficulty menstruating smoothly and richly. And the idea of the womb being rich and able to receive the sperm and produce a child is out of the question. So it's a precondition for fertility and gestation and the process of giving birth.
Mhm. As you mentioned with the action of the Jing, uh, what are your point of view of the action of the Shen when you give a Shiatsu to someone, you treat the Jing, but we are a Shen experiencing the Jing. So
Mm.
let's talk about it.
Well, let's talk about that. I think that when I think about the Shen, I think about the heart meridian primarily, and I think about the Shen as being the sum total of the brilliance of the human spirit. And when we think about the five spirits, we can think about it as a pyramid, where the deepest level is the Jing and the Yuan Qi and the Zhi, the will and the
Mhm.
perseverance. And then we have the Bo, which is one level up, which has to do with integrity of the body mind and protecting, setting up boundaries between things and identity. Moving up one more level, we have the Yi, which is to do with sorting impressions of life, digesting the experiences of life, creating focus and intent, making sense out of things, using reason and logic to create a path through life. If we go up one step higher, we have the Hun, which is to do with our creative spirit, the way we plot our course through life and dream ourselves into new reality and new situations. We draw energy down from subtle realms, from dream worlds and from fantasy worlds, imagination. We create our lives. But the highest level of all, of course, is what you're talking about, the Shen. And this is difficult to talk about because it has to do with the divine, it has to do with the eternal, and it has to do with the part of us which never dies, which is eternal. And the Shen between you and me, Fabian, is very, very strong because we operate on a very similar level. So we can immediately move on to that level. And sometimes there's a communication, doesn't even need words because words are not very useful on the Shen level, only in the poetical sense and
Mhm.
the sense of imagery. So for me, treating the Shen is more like treating the other five and having them build up into the Shen. They create the Shen as they clean themselves, as they purify themselves, and as they harmonize themselves into one unified body of spirit. The Shen is the final gleaming, shining product of all of that.
Mhm.
Because the Shen is essentially our connection to the divine. And our connection to the divine is almost contradictory to our connection to the earth. It's almost such a completely different thing that a lot of people have problems existing in this reality. The Shen is not really very well rooted into the Jing, for example, and then there's a disconnect, which means that the whole human doesn't really function very well. And I think we see quite a lot of this actually. Broadly speaking, that is the major problem with life. Um, and there are various reasons for that. And some of them are traumatic, of course, and some of them are to do with karma, the things that we bring with us into this life, and perhaps the things that we need to work through, etc. So working with Shen can come from many different directions, but for me, it's rarely direct. It's usually indirect. So I don't use the Shen points that often in treatments. Very occasionally I'll do it, but for me, it's a special occasion. I can hear trumpets in the background and angelic choirs singing. It's a very special occasion when I work directly on the Shen. So I hope that answers a little part of your question anyway.
Yes, it's a part of question. When I teach Shiatsu and when I teach five elements, I explain it's on a earth level on horizontal parts, and when we
Mm,
can see the fire that eats, and we make it vertical, that is the fire
mm,
that lights, and
mm,
we have a sphere and we can I try to just to open the door to each student to that to that sphere and to the divine, as you said. And
Mm.
the sphere, it's where I want to push you. The sphere is like the eight extraordinary meridian. It's like
Oh,
spherical, and there is the vertical with Chiang Mai, and Chiang Mai maybe it's the highway for the Shen
mm.
to be rooted.
Ah,
Think about it.
well, what we're moving into here is a discussion that parallels the Ayurvedic discussion of the Shushuma.
Hmm.
They've reasoned that the parallel channels moving up snake-like through the chakra eventually build the Shushuma channel in the middle, so that when we build the body, when we clarify the chakras, when we make the energy centers strong, clean, and aligned with each other, then we create the potential for the shining of the Shen in its absolute purest form.
Hmm.
So that's a continual work and a cumulative work that we are engaged in, I think, continually. And what we find, I think, is that one thing leads to another, and we have to put the base in first. And this is something that we probably in Shiatsu and a lot of these Oriental disciplines like Qigong and meditation, we take it for granted that we work from the bottom up. We place the base, we root the base, we make sure the roots have good soil, are nourished by good water. We have the earth power coming into us. And from there, we build upwards. And it's increasingly subtle energy we use as we go upwards until words again cease to have very much meaning when we get into these upper realms, which are highly esoteric and etheric. One of the problems, as I see it, is that people try to get to these levels too quickly and they don't put the roots in first, which I think is the major lesson that we have from the East. Once the roots are there, then you can build. Then you can become as flowery and as esoteric and as etheric as you like because your roots are stable. If you look at a picture of a tree, for example, the roots are as big as the trunk, as the crown. And this relationship is stabilizing and harmonizing so that
Hmm.
they can, a tree can always feed nutrition into its branches and twigs and flowers, but also feed that energy back down into the roots every autumn and winter to revive itself and continue its existence. Sometimes I think we forget to do that.
Yes, in our civilization, we are in top-down teaching and learning, and in that way, this is bottom-up. We learn through our body, and that's why it takes times to learn and practice shiatsu. That's in that way you teach in your seminars.
Yeah. Um, it's a very distinctive thing that we have in Shiatsu, and it may be one of the reasons why Shiatsu takes so long to grow and to become popular, because we spend so much time with the ground, with the roots, with the basics
Mhm.
of posture, of presence, of preparing ourselves through various exercises of qigong, of makaho, of meditation, of yoga, all of these different things that prepare the soil long before we plant the tree. This is actually the traditional way of agriculture as well. Prepare the soil, then plant the crops. And nowadays, of course, we've gone exactly as you said, the other way around. We plant the crops, plant them again, plant them again. The soil is denuded
Yeah, put the
and
fertilizer
spoiled.
and so on. It's and shiatsu. It's organic way to.
Yes. This is the beauty of shiatsu. It's also why we're so quiet in our work and why we don't have a lot of time to do publicity work and shout about what we're doing. We're busy doing it, as you said. You're busy in your clinic treating trauma, while a lot of other people are writing about it and shouting about it. The groundwork that we do is the thing that helps it pay off in the long run. But it's a quiet method and it's not a popular way of seeing things. It's a way of doing things that is rooted in an old, I think possibly even I would go so far as to say timeless method of cultivation.
How do you see the future of shiatsu in our world?
I see a very bright future for Shiatsu, but again, I see it blossoming slowly. And of course, that is necessary in one way because of if you try to rush Shiatsu, it doesn't produce Shiatsu. It produces something else, which is probably fine, but it won't be Shiatsu. It won't have this deep, bearing base, which we need, which we're so reliant on. Because you mentioned some of the things that you're dealing with nowadays in your clinic: incest, rape, sexual abuse, all sorts of abuse. These are the things that we're looking at, and deep trauma of all sorts of different types. And I would also add the kind of thing that people begin to uncover as they do their spiritual work is karmic. And they'll discover that they're not quite as nice and innocent people as they thought they were sometimes. And they've also done things that weren't so wonderful. And this needs to be worked with too. So the kind of things that people show us during shiatsu treatments are sometimes quite shocking. And they can quickly move you out of your center unless your center is so rooted that it can't be shifted. These are the reasons we spend so long cultivating the base, because when the tempest strikes, we're solid. Our roots hold, and we can just sit with somebody through a process, not be disturbed by it. Of course, we're moved by it always, but the root sits where it's supposed to sit, which means that they can be as wild and as ragged and as, yes, let's say emotional and passionate and violent as they need to be. We hold the space doesn't move, and then we collect it at the end, and then we move on to the next phase, whatever that might be.
Yeah, so Shiatsu is not only an art of peace of the receiver, for the giver also, and maybe the path of enlightenment. What do you think of that?
No, I think you're absolutely right, Fabian. But of course, necessarily a slow one.
Mhm.
So it's not one where lots of fireworks are being set off continually. It's one where work is being done often quietly and almost invisibly.
Mhm.
So that the growth that you'll see, you can't see on a day-to-day basis very often. What you see is year by year.
Mhm.
When a patient comes back to you after a few months, you can see there's a change going on there. There's a subtle confidence in their way of walking. There's a way of owning their speech that they didn't have before, for example. And these things are really important, but they don't make major headlines. They just happen to enrich that person's life. And in enriching that person's life, what I think a major thing that we sometimes miss is that that person enriches the lives of the people around them. So the image of rings on water is a very important one for us in Shiatsu. Each contribution we make to a person's life, and of course our own life, you mentioned the reciprocal nature of Shiatsu. We grow steadily and slowly in our process, in our practice. That branches out into all areas of our life. Every person we meet in the shop, in the pub, in the street, anywhere we meet them in a social gathering, we have this effect of like calming, rooting, clearing, without saying too much about the things, the issues themselves. We create the soil or the ground for other people to relax, calm, and come back to their own center.
I
So
like
yes,
I like the
definitely a
image of the
problem.
riddle of the water, and
Mm,
sometimes I see when you throw a rock in the water, you can have an idea of the riddles at the surface, but what it's really nice, it's the stone that touch the bottom, and we don't know what's happened. And shiatsu, it's quite like that.
yeah, really is. And you can, years ago, one of my teachers, I just did one weekend with her. She was teaching Reiki, and she said something that stuck with me. Never judge a treatment, which of course works both ways because sometimes you think you did a great treatment and it bounces off and doesn't really do much. Sometimes you think you did a mediocre treatment, but it's for some reason it enters, it goes deep, and it makes a change. And the person comes back, well, a week later or 2 weeks later, said that last treatment was amazing. Oh, really? And you think I was really not on my best form, and I really didn't think that I hit the target with that treatment, but still something happens, and we cannot, I think, really ever predict the result of what we do, which of course helps us if we realize that. It helps us to detach from results and enter pure process. And it brings us more clearly into the moment without a lot of expectations and strings attached and limitations. And we enter this space that we call not knowing,
It's
which is
a very
incredibly.
nice advice for all the practitioner. Don't judge your practice and your treatment, and just spread it, do it, and let things happen.
Just do it, let things happen.
Yeah.
Exactly right, Fabian.
Mhm.
I don't think you can say it more clearly than that.
Yeah, it's a very wise advice. So let's practice shiatsu. Let's do it and
Let's
let
do
it happen and
it.
let it bloom in the world.
Let it bloom. I think we must be realistic and expect it to bloom slowly.
Mhm.
But I can see so many positive signs in many, many places. And this gives me a lot of confidence for the future of Shiatsu. One of the things I see happening is that there are difficulties. There are difficulties in a lot of countries, but I think that's because there are difficulties right now as we transition from an old and I think quite corrupt form of society and of living and of relationship to a newer, a much more open and more honest and more connected form of living. Now, you showed me the calligraphy on your wall just now, Fabian, with heaven, man, and earth, and I think we're going to moving back to that way of living much more clearly in the coming years. And I don't think it's going to take that long, but it's going to be a bit messy. And we Shiatsu people, our job is to just hold that space that we do and radiate gently into our surroundings, as the old Taoists taught us to do, just like Feng Shui teaches us to do, and continue that. And there'll be a new way of doing Shiatsu in the coming years. And I think, yes, some of the schools have gone, some of the structures have dissolved. That also clears a space for new structures and new methods and new connections and pathways to open up. So I'm very optimistic about it.
Very nice. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Fabian. Really nice to talk to you.
It's a pleasure too.